Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some people.
On A View from the Outside this week being Saturday the 25th of September 2021, we do a program with a slight difference, as we do from time to time. We are going to have a discussion on a few topics. And we're going to start with Garifuna. It was heartwarming to see our Garifuna brothers and sisters, descendants of Garifuna ancestors, recently, early in September, visiting Portchester Castle near Fareham in Hampshire in the southeast of England. Our Garifuna brothers and sisters were tracing their genealogy and family history. They were retracing the footsteps of their ancestors, our ancestors. Their ancestors, our ancestors, became prisoners of war after they were captured in St. Vincent during the French Revolution. These were our people. Those who came recently are our people, the Garifuna from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The British captured them around 1796 when they chose to fight for the French. These are freedom fighters. They were freedom fighters, and they were held as prisoners of war by the British. What is most touching from the video is to see our Garifuna brothers beating their drums in the most traditional way as they retraced the steps of our ancestors, their ancestors. The sound of the drumbeat reverberated and echoed around Portchester Castle. The emotions were raw when they were shown inside the castle and they saw relics to remind them of the way their ancestors, our ancestors, were treated. They said they came to feel the spirit, to reconnect with our ancestors somehow. Some of them said they had goosebumps and they felt the spirit and the protection of the spirits. Drumming was a significant part of that reconnecting with the ancestors, and the visitors to Portchester Castle said they will do everything to keep that part of their culture alive. That is drumming and dancing. So when we see police taking away the drums of protesters on the protest line in Kingstown, St. Vincent, it makes the experience even more painful for the descendants of Garifuna. Our Garifuna ancestors are probably turning over in their graves, their spirits disturbed, wondering what has become of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, wondering what has really become of Ureme. These are the kinds of things that our people, including police officers, need to be aware of. These are the kinds of things that our people must preserve, the culture of our ancestors. Another topic we look at today is called preferential treatment. By this, we mean that some people are treated preferentially, depending on who you are in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This kind of cockeyed approach has done nothing but bring division and discontentment in the country. We will now do a comparison between two separate events to exemplify what we mean by preferential treatment. Some years ago, in fact on the 28th of March 2012, the then St. Vincent and the Grenadines ambassador to the United Nations was arrested in New York. He was reported in the Caribbean Journal as having been arrested because he refused protocol. He refused to identify himself, and he was asked several times to stop by a uniformed police officer, and he did not stop. Following his arrest, it seems as if all hell broke loose. It seems as if people poured out of the woodwork everywhere to mount a defense for him. It has been said that it was as if the officers in the New York Police Department, the NYPD, had touched the anointed. A petition was even sent to the mayor of New York, who at the time was Michael Bloomberg, to make a public apology to the then ambassador Camilo Gonzalez. And there were threats of lawsuits by the ambassador himself and by others on his behalf. So that was the treatment which Camilo Gonzalez received. Even CARICOM chimed in on his behalf. All of the so-called progressives and others were falling over themselves to jump to his aid publicly. Now, fast forward to 2021, Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. People are exercising their constitutional right to protest and are protesting or were protesting because of the vindictiveness, the victimization, the repression, and the oppression of the regime of which Camilo Gonzalez is the Minister of Finance. Subsequent to the protesters exercising their constitutional right to protest, many have had their homes raided by the Black Squad police officers who appeared fully armed with assault rifles and other guns and ammunition. Many have been arrested, roughed up, and held in chokehold in a way reminiscent of the chokehold on Eric Gardner and of Derek Chauvin with his knee on the neck of George Floyd. Compare the way they were treated and see how those who were arrested have been denigrated and debased. A look at the treatment of Adriana King, who was arrested in the presence of her 8-year-old daughter with guns on display. Look at her public arrest, of how she was dragged off the protest line. The so-called progressives who were most vociferous on the Camilo Gonzalez matter seem to be non-existent on this one. The one in Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where the protesters were arrested. They, the progressives, remain silent, while Adriana King and others are pilloried. They are not asking now for a public apology, or for any apology for that matter. They are not asking for apology on behalf of Adriana King or on behalf of any of the others. They say nothing about the chokehold which debilitated Carly John, the husband of Senator Chevron John. There is not a word from CARICOM, who was quick to chime in on the defense of Camilo Gonzalez. The so-called progressives remain quiet, even in the face of the drums of protesters being seized. Those drums, which are so reminiscent of our ancestors, and that ancestral spirit which our Garifuna brothers and sisters journeyed all the way from Central America to Portchester Castle in the southeast of England to reconnect with. So, it does not take a rocket scientist to figure out who got and continues to get the preferential treatment. It certainly was not Adriana King or any of the others. We on A View from the Outside say that such bold-faced, shameless behavior needs to stop. It is time for all Vincentians to be treated equally. We say that it is time for justice to prevail. And so we move on to distraction. Last week, we covered the topic distraction. In that episode, we encourage you all, Vincentians, both at home and in the Vincentian diaspora, not to be distracted from the things that really matter to Vincentians and to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We encouraged you to stay focused and to stay on course and to ignore and cast aside the distractions. In that regard, we feel compelled to remind you to continue to demand the following things. Continue to demand accountability for the $95 million plus which the Director of Audit has reported is missing from the nation's purse. Remember to highlight that the missing $95 plus million is up to 2015. Much more could be missing, but we do not know because the regime continues to refuse to provide up-to-date accounts of the nation's finances. Constitutionally, the finances of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are approved by the Director of Audit and not by any quasi-body which the regime purports to set up to do so. Do not be distracted by any such body purporting to provide accountability, transparency, and oversight. The Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines reigns supreme. Remember that you are in extreme poverty while there are $95 million missing from the country's purse. Continue to demand accountability for donations, grants, aids, and loans received to assist Vincentians during the volcanic eruption of La Soufrière. Continue to demand that all those who were displaced and affected by the disasters need to benefit from the generosity which others have extended to the country in its time of crisis. Demand your constitutional right to protest. Let it work for you and for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Demand justice for Yogi Farrell, Bigger Biggs, Marcus De Freitas, Dr. Wayne Murray and his wife Simone Murray and their family, Mr. John, and all of the others. Do not let any distraction stop you from continuing to demand justice for all in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Remember and support all those citizens who joined the protests demanding accountability for the $95 million plus, demanding justice for Mr. John, and demanding a repeal of the amendments of the Public Health Act. Give them as much encouragement and support as possible. Encourage them to continue in their protest. Continue to demand justice for Cornelius John. Always highlight the fact that he reported that Senator Ashel Morgan, a ULP senator, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly, along with Karim Nelson and another man, trespassed on his property. He alleged that they threatened him, beat him, and shot him in the leg before fleeing the scene. He alleged that Ashel Morgan threatened him at gunpoint, and he alleged that Karim Nelson shot him in the leg. Yet he, Cornelius John, the victim, faces criminal charges. Do not let any distraction stop you from continuing to point out that whilst his case is yet to be decided by the court, grave injustice is revealed in the stark disparity of the police investigation pertaining to the treatment of him, Mr. John, the victim, and the seeming protection afforded to those accused of shooting him in the leg. in particular the seeming protection afforded to Ashel Morgan. Demand that the police stop the arbitrary and wanton arrest of Vincentians. There's so much more to keep demanding, and it is here that we encourage you to highlight them and to continue the conversation with your friends and family and everyone around you. We take the time here and now, and that is we on A View from the Outside. We take the time here and now to appeal to the so-called progressives. We ask you to shed your fear and act impartially. Shed the greed and selfishness and work for the betterment of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You know that many will not forgive you. You know that many will not forget you for watching them sink, and you do nothing nor say anything to assist them. It must be hard for you, especially in light of what the American writer and political activist Upton Sinclair said. He said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." We, here on A View from the Outside, however, encourage you, and we encourage every other Vincentian to do what is right for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Until next week, Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Horne. Justin, you and all of the listeners have a pleasant Saturday. Have a wonderful Sunday, and have a productive week ahead as you ponder on the issues we raise in this episode.